visiting scholar at Seton Hall University. He specializes in diplomacy and international relations, especially UN studies. He's joining us from New York. Well, Jessica really gave us a nice overview. Of course, Trump will meet with Xi. It'll be the last meeting. It's reserved for the White House, describing it as an expanded meeting. There's a lot to cover. What can we expect?
Well, it's important to remember that this is a G20 meeting, a multilateral gathering, and not strictly a bilateral meeting between the U.S. and China. And what these wonderful G20 meetings and mega events enable are opportunities to meet up, get together, perhaps deal on a more informal basis, pull asides. For instance, we saw that happen between President Xi and Prime Minister Modi of India. So the expectations, I believe, are quite high at this G20, and unnecessarily so. We really need to temper our expectations when we load it up with so many issues. Just the U.S.-China relationship under discussion there carries 5 or 6 very major points, and much less looking at the rest of the G20's relationship with those who are not in the G20, and also looking at the opportunity for global growth. What should be stated is that the G20, all G20 countries this year are expected to experience positive economic growth, the first time since the 2008 financial meltdown. And yet there is a need for more robust global economic recovery. There is a growing tide of protectionism and other global risks in the world. But just to state that the relationship between China and the U.S. is an ongoing phenomenon. It's part of the great arc of history, and this is a good opportunity to continue talking, especially when tensions might be seen as high on a daily basis given headlines.
Yeah, well, let's talk about tensions on the Korean Peninsula. Obviously, each one of these countries coming at this from a different point of view, and of course, China not very excited about the THAAD deployment. Do you think that they can make any headway there?
Well, I certainly hope so, and we all do. We've seen such provocation from North Korea on our Independence Day with the launching of a potential intercontinental ballistic missile capacity that was quite unexpected, I would say, by Washington and others. So we are hopeful that there can be more action. We saw a UN discussion this week in the Security Council with our ambassador asking for more cooperation from China. We really, in the United States, look to China to help us solve this problem. And I think there has been expressed a bit of frustration by the president that he perhaps had been hoping for a bit more momentum, a little more progress by this time.
You brought it up, Indian Prime Minister Modi and Xi, they shook hands today. They had words of praise for one another as the border standoff, of course, continues. What do you make of what happened today during this informal meeting of the BRICS nations? Does that help to ease tensions a bit, you think?
Well, that was a wonderful example of statesmanship at work. The opportunity to meet was never scheduled. The expectations were kept very low on both sides, so that when in fact there was a moment, a good opportunity for them to exchange regards for each other. In fact, they each praised each other in certain ways. China praising India's economic activity and also its dealing with terrorism, and India in turn praising China's a preparation for the next BRICS summit, which is to occur later this fall. So I was quite happy to see that statesmanship on display. These G20 and other multilateral meetings offer that opportunity for things to occur without great expectation, but will take the benefit when it arises.
The Chinese president also talking about the world economy, an open world economy, but he seems to be preaching to the choir with the exception of Donald Trump. Is he going to make much headway in changing his mind?
Well, to some extent, the host of the event, Germany, has perhaps tried to isolate the United States a bit more than it should. We see the context of this event more or less framed against protectionism and other things that speak to a nationalist agenda in many countries that are questioning globalization and stuff of that nature. The missing on this context is the question of immigration around the world, the question of terrorism. It should very much be on this agenda as well. So I think that Germany is trying to isolate the U.S. a bit for its advantage. I think it's looking for a deeper, more complete trading relationship with China, which is wonderful. They're both now almost each other's largest trading partners. Certainly, Germany is now China's largest recipient of trade, or vice versa, excuse me. And so I believe that protectionism is not to be seen as part of a solution, yet I think what we're seeing is not outright protectionism. It's an opportunity perhaps to revisit some of the arrangements and deals that were made over time that are perhaps becoming a bit tired and a bit obsolete.
All right, Hugh, thanks so much for your observations and joining us from New York.